The cowboy was waiting for his mail-order girlfriend. But instead, a giant Apache woman twice his size arrived. The cowboy sat on the wooden porch of his small ranch, rocking slowly in his creaking chair. The sun hung low in the sky, turning the horizon into shades of orange and gold, and a soft wind carried the smell of dry grass and earth. He wiped the sweat from his brow and squinted toward the dusty trail that led into the valley. Today was the day. The day he had been waiting for longer than he cared to admit. The day the letters promised would change his life. For months, he had written back and forth with a woman he had never seen, a mail-order bride who claimed she longed for the wide-open spaces and honest life of a ranch. Her letters were full of careful words, polite sentences, and promises of devotion. She spoke of wanting to learn the ways of the land, of imagining a quiet home with children laughing under the big sky. Every letter made him imagine her sitting here on this porch, smiling shyly, hands folded neatly in her lap. He pictured her hair, her dress, the way she might look at him with a gentle gaze. In the quiet moments of the evening, he could almost see her sitting there, listening to the wind, humming softly. His neighbors had tried to warn him. Old men at the general store had laughed and shaken their heads. "Don't set your heart too high, son," one had said. "These arrangements, they don't always turn out like you hope." Others had whispered about the risks of loneliness, about the letters that didn't match reality. But the cowboy had paid no mind. He had chosen to believe. He had held on to the hope that this woman would be the companion he had always wanted, the one who could understand the quiet life of the land, the early mornings and late nights, the endless work that came with caring for animals and tending to a ranch. He stood and walked slowly down the porch steps, boots crunching against the dry dirt. He looked at the horizon again, trying to spot any sign of the approaching stagecoach. Dust had already begun to rise in the distance, and he felt his pulse quicken. The wind carried it closer, and with it, the sound of horses' hooves pounding the earth. His heart beat faster. What if she wasn't what he expected? What if she didn't fit into his life at all? He pushed the thought aside. He didn't want doubt today. He wanted hope. The cowboy had spent the morning preparing for her arrival. He had swept the porch until the boards shone in the sun. Fresh flowers, wildflowers gathered from the edge of the river, were placed in a small tin bucket, ready to welcome her. The kitchen smelled faintly of bread and stew. The smell meant to feel comforting and homelike. Everything had to be perfect. He wanted to show her that he was ready, that he had built a life that was honest and steady, a life worth joining. As the sound of hooves grew louder, he leaned against the wooden railing and tried to calm himself. The stagecoach came into view, a small cloud of dust trailing behind it. He watched as it drew closer, the figures of the driver and a few passengers beginning to take shape. His stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. He had imagined this moment countless times in his mind, but nothing could truly prepare him for the reality of it. The stagecoach came to a slow stop in front of his ranch. The driver tipped his hat and gave a small nod, waiting for the passenger to disembark. The cowboy's eyes were fixed on the door, waiting to see her step out. And then the door opened. He stepped forward instinctively, ready to greet the woman he had dreamed of for so long. But the figure that emerged was not what he had expected. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. A tall woman stepped down, her presence commanding and undeniable. She was strong and solid, her frame towering over him in a way that made him step back without thinking. Her skin was sun-kissed, her hair dark and thick, and her eyes held a sharp intelligence that seemed to measure everything at once. She moved with confidence, her boots hitting the ground with purpose. The cowboy blinked, twice. He had imagined someone delicate, someone small and gentle, someone who would blend easily into his life. This woman was the opposite. She radiated strength. She had a presence that filled the space around her. She was no timid, shy girl. She was tall, broad-shouldered, and powerful, her body clearly used to hard work and the rigors of the land. And yet, there was something in her eyes that held curiosity, even kindness, as if she was willing to understand this stranger standing before her. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He had rehearsed greetings, polite sentences, smiles, and introductions. Nothing prepared him for the reality of her arrival. His mind raced to reconcile the letters with the person standing before him. The descriptions on paper had been careful, almost delicate. He had assumed someone smaller, gentler, easier to manage, someone who could sit quietly by the fire in the evenings. He hadn't imagined someone like this, someone so commanding, so alive with energy and strength. She noticed his hesitation and smiled faintly, though her smile did not diminish her powerful presence. Instead, it added warmth to it, a softness beneath the strength. She extended a hand, not in meekness, but in polite greeting, steady and confident. The cowboy took it, his hand feeling small in hers, the difference in size startling him. He could feel her strength even in that simple handshake, and it made him suddenly aware of just how different she was from the image he had held in his mind. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two people measuring one another, both unsure how to proceed after so many expectations and imagined scenarios. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of earth and horses, and the cowboy realized that nothing could have prepared him for this moment. And yet, there was something in the way she looked at him, curious, open, willing, that made him think this could work. Somehow. He cleared his throat and nodded. "Welcome to my ranch," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. I'm glad you're here." She nodded in return, her eyes scanning the porch, the house, the wide open land that stretched into the distance. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm and strong. "It's bigger than I imagined." The cowboy laughed softly, a little embarrassed, and stepped aside to let her pass onto the porch. "It's my home," he said. "Not much, but it's steady and honest." She looked around, her gaze lingering on the landscape, the animals grazing in the distance, the fence posts stretching toward the horizon. She nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on her face. "It's different," she said. "I can see why you wanted it." He watched her as she moved, taking in the space with confident steps, and felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. Relief because she seemed to respect the land, the effort it took to make it livable. Nervousness because she was unlike anyone he had imagined, and he didn't yet know if he could adapt to someone so strong, so different from what he expected. The stagecoach driver and a few helpers began unloading her belongings. Crates and trunks filled with clothing, personal items, and small gifts made their way to the porch. The cowboy offered his help, trying to act normal, but his mind was still racing. He wondered how she would settle in, how she would fit into the quiet rhythm of ranch life, whether they could build a life together despite the surprises. As they worked, he noticed her laugh, a deep, hearty sound that carried easily over the wind. It was not the delicate laugh he had imagined from the letters. It was strong and genuine, a laugh that filled the space and made him realize that maybe, just maybe, this surprise could be better than anything he had imagined. By the time the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ranch, they had finished unloading the stagecoach. She stood beside him on the porch, hands on her hips, looking over the land with the same thoughtful expression he had seen earlier. "It's a lot to take in," she said. "I'll need time to get used to it." He nodded, understanding more than she realized. "So will I," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out." As evening fell, the sky painted in streaks of pink and purple, the cowboy felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. The woman who had arrived was nothing like he expected. She was strong, confident, and commanding, yet there was a softness beneath her strength, a willingness to understand and adapt. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. This was the beginning of a story far more interesting than the quiet life he had imagined alone on the ranch. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, painting the sky in soft oranges and yellows. Birds chirped among the trees, and a gentle breeze rustled the tall grasses that bordered the fence lines. The cowboy awoke early, as he always did, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath his boots echoing in the quiet house. He moved carefully, not wanting to wake the woman who had arrived only the day before. He paused at the doorway of her room, curious to see how she had settled in. The room was simple, as most of the ranch house was. A wooden bed, clean sheets, and a small chest of drawers made it modest but comfortable. He noticed that she had already begun arranging her things, stacking clothing neatly and placing small personal items on the windowsill. It was clear she had a sense of order, a methodical way of living that mirrored the strength he had seen in her the day before. For a moment, he admired her quietly, seeing the care she took even in the simplest of tasks. When she emerged from her room, she wore practical clothing suited for the work ahead. Her boots were sturdy, her sleeves rolled up, and her hair tied back to keep it out of her face. She looked over the ranch with sharp eyes, taking in the animals, the fences, and the open space stretching into the distance. The cowboy approached her slowly, trying not to startle her. "Good morning," he said softly. "Did you sleep well?" She turned to him and nodded, her expression calm but alert. "Yes," she said, The bed is comfortable. The house, it's different from what I imagined, but I like it. He smiled. It's simple, but it works. There's a lot to do around here. I hope you don't mind hard work. She looked at him, and for a moment he thought he saw a spark of amusement in her eyes. I can handle it, she said. I've managed difficult work before. This should be interesting. Their first breakfast together was quiet. The cowboy prepared eggs, bacon, and bread while she watched, asking questions about the routine of ranch life. She seemed curious about everything, from the way he fed the animals to the tools he used for maintenance. Her questions were practical, not idle chatter, showing a mind accustomed to thinking and understanding. After breakfast, they stepped outside to begin the day's work. The sun was higher now, warming the earth, and the ranch seemed alive with activity. Horses moved in the paddocks, cattle grazed lazily, and the wind carried the scent of hay and dust. The cowboy showed her the way he tended the animals, demonstrating how to check for illness, how to secure the fences, and how to guide the cattle into the pens. She watched carefully, her eyes sharp and attentive. When it was her turn to try, she surprised him. She lifted the feed sacks with ease, moving them to the storage barn without struggling. Her hands, though large and strong, were precise, gentle when they needed to be, careful not to harm the animals. He found himself stepping back, unsure of how to react to her strength. Everything he had imagined about delicacy and fragility was gone. Here was a woman capable of more than he had expected, and yet she was willing to learn his ways. The day continued with tasks that tested both their patience and their ability to work together. They repaired fences, moving posts and pulling wire. He showed her how to mend holes in the barn roof, balancing carefully on beams, while she followed instructions, adapting her strength to his methods. Occasionally, he offered guidance, pointing out a better angle to lift a post or a safer way to handle a hammer. She listened, nodded, and adjusted her movements, never arguing, only learning. At times, their interactions were awkward. She had a way of speaking that was straightforward, direct, and sometimes unintentionally blunt. When he suggested a gentler approach to lifting a heavy crate, she looked at him, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Gentle won't move this." He chuckled nervously, realizing that his ideas of gentleness were not practical for her. Yet even in those moments, there was a growing respect, a recognition that each of them brought something valuable to the work. The cowboy noticed how she handled the horses. At first, he had been worried. Her size might frighten the animals, or they might not respond to her guidance. But she approached them calmly, speaking softly yet firmly. The horses seemed to respect her, moving obediently under her direction. He realized that her presence alone commanded attention, and the animals responded to it naturally. By mid-afternoon, they were both sweating and tired. The sun was high, and the work had been demanding, but there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. They stood together, looking over the tasks they had completed, and the cowboy felt a mix of admiration and surprise. The woman before him was unlike anyone he had imagined, but she had proven herself capable, intelligent, and willing to adapt. During a brief break, they sat on the porch, drinking water and wiping the sweat from their faces. She looked out over the land, thoughtful, and the cowboy hesitated before speaking. "You've handled today better than I expected," he said, trying to sound casual but failing to hide the amazement in his voice. She glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I've managed difficult work before," she said. "This is different, yes, but not impossible." He laughed softly, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't anticipated. "I thought it might be harder for you. I didn't expect someone so capable." Her smile widened slightly. "I take that as a compliment," she said. "I can see you thought I would be smaller, weaker. But I'm me, you'll have to adjust to that." He nodded, feeling a mix of humility and amusement. "I think I'll manage," he said. "I have to, there's no turning back now." As the day wore on, they continued to work, the rhythm of the ranch guiding their actions. They learned to move together, anticipating each other's movements, figuring out the best way to cooperate. There were moments of laughter when crates tipped over or tools slipped, and moments of quiet focus as they repaired the fences or guided the cattle. By evening, both were exhausted but satisfied, having accomplished more than they had thought possible. The cowboy began to see her not as an unexpected surprise, but as a partner. Her strength, which had initially startled him, was now a resource. Her intelligence, curiosity, and willingness to learn complemented his experience and knowledge of the land. There was a balance forming, a silent understanding that each had something to offer, and that together they could manage the demands of ranch life. That night they shared a simple meal, the smell of stew and fresh bread filling the small kitchen. Conversation was easier now, flowing naturally, with stories of her past work and experiences blending with tales of his life on the ranch. She spoke of the land she had grown up on, the skills she had learned, and the challenges she had faced. He listened, intrigued by her resilience and independence, and found himself sharing his own struggles and triumphs in a way he hadn't expected. As the evening deepened, they sat quietly on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear night sky. The ranch was peaceful, bathed in silver moonlight, and for the first time the cowboy felt a sense of calm about the future. He realized that the woman who had arrived yesterday, so different from what he had imagined, was not a problem to solve or an expectation to meet. She was a person, capable, strong, and willing to learn, and that made her an ideal companion for the life he had built. He glanced at her, noticing the way she looked over the land, her expression thoughtful and alert. "You fit in here better than I expected," he said softly. She turned to him, her eyes catching the moonlight. "I'll need time," she said, "but I think I can make this work." He nodded, feeling a quiet sense of relief. "We'll make it work together," he said. And in that moment, standing side by side under the stars, both of them understood that the challenges ahead would be met not with hesitation or fear, but with cooperation, respect, and growing trust. The ranch, the work, and the life they were beginning to share would test them, shape them, and ultimately bring them closer together. For the cowboy, the surprise of her arrival was no longer something to worry about. It was the beginning of something new, exciting, and full of possibilities. A story far richer than any he had imagined in his letters, and one that would continue to unfold with each passing day on the ranch. The next morning, the cowboy awoke to the familiar sound of birds singing and the soft light of the sun spilling into the ranch house. The air smelled of dew and fresh earth, a promise of another long day ahead. Today, he knew, would be different. Yesterday had been about learning and observation, easing into routines. Today would test them both, a day filled with the real work the ranch demanded. He stepped outside, the cool grass brushing against his boots, and saw her already waiting near the barn. She stood tall, hands on her hips, eyes scanning the horizon as if planning the day's tasks. Her presence was commanding, and he felt a mixture of admiration and nervous anticipation. He realized he had grown used to her strength, her size, and her quiet confidence, but today he would see how they could truly work together. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Ready for the real work?" She turned to him and smiled faintly. "Always," she said. Her voice carried determination, and he felt a spark of reassurance. She wasn't someone who would shy away from effort or challenge. She belonged here on this land, facing the demands head-on. Their first task was to check the fences along the northern boundary. A recent storm had damaged parts of the fence, and some posts were loose or broken. They grabbed tools and walked together, the sound of wood creaking and metal clanging mixing with the calls of the animals. The cowboy explained the areas that needed attention, pointing out weak spots and showing how to reinforce them. She listened carefully, nodding, and then began working. The sight of her lifting heavy posts with ease left him momentarily speechless. Where he had struggled to move a single post yesterday, she carried two at a time, placing them precisely where they belonged. He followed behind her, securing the posts with nails and wire, feeling both humbled and grateful. Her strength made the work faster, but it also highlighted the difference in their experience and backgrounds. As they moved along the fence line, a sudden noise startled them. A cow had broken through a weakened section and wandered into the open field. The cowboy's heart raced. He knew the animal could easily wander into danger or cause damage if not guided back quickly. "We need to get her back," he said, pointing toward the stray cow. Without hesitation, she moved to intercept the animal, her long strides closing the distance quickly. She spoke softly but firmly, guiding the cow back toward the pen. Her presence was reassuring to the animal, and her strength made it impossible for the cow to resist her direction. The cowboy followed, helping to close the gate once the animal was safely inside. He shook his head in disbelief. Her skills, her calmness under pressure, and her natural ability to handle the animals amazed him. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed higher, and the work grew more difficult. They repaired the barn roof, replacing broken shingles and reinforcing weak beams. The cowboy climbed carefully, showing her how to balance while handling tools. She followed his guidance, but when a heavy beam needed lifting, she did so effortlessly, surprising him once again. He laughed aloud, a mix of astonishment and relief, realizing that her strength was not a threat but an asset. During lunch, they sat under the shade of a large oak tree, sharing bread, cheese, and cold water. They were both sweaty and tired, but the shared effort had created a bond that went beyond words. The cowboy looked at her, noticing the dirt on her hands, the way her sleeves were rolled up, and the determination in her eyes. He felt a deep sense of respect growing inside him. She was no ordinary woman, no delicate figure from his imagination. She was real, capable, and utterly remarkable. After lunch, they turned to tending the horses. The ranch had several horses, each with its own temperament. One in particular was known to be stubborn and difficult to handle. The cowboy had learned to approach it with patience, but he watched as she approached the horse with calm authority. Her size did not intimidate the animal. Instead, it seemed to respect her presence. She guided the horse with a steady voice and careful movements, and soon it was following her without resistance. The cowboy felt a mixture of awe and amusement. "I've never seen it respond so well," he said. "Most people take hours to earn its trust." She smiled, brushing her hair back from her face. "Sometimes you just need to show confidence," she said simply. "The rest follows." The afternoon brought new challenges. A sudden rainstorm swept across the valley, turning paths into slippery mud and making the work much harder. They had to move quickly to secure the animals and protect the barn from potential leaks. The cowboy slipped more than once in the mud, but she was steady, guiding him and lending her strength when needed. Together, they moved with surprising coordination, balancing speed and caution, and managed to secure everything before the worst of the storm hit. Once the rain eased, they returned to the house, drenched and exhausted but satisfied. The work had been hard, testing their limits and patience, but it had also shown them how well they could cooperate. The cowboy began to see her not just as a surprising visitor, but as an indispensable partner, someone whose abilities complemented his own. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, they sat on the porch, drying off and catching their breath. The ranch was quiet now, animals settled and safe, and the land stretched peacefully into the distance. The cowboy felt a sense of calm he had not known before. "You make this look easy," he said, shaking his head. "I don't know how you do it." She looked at him, eyes thoughtful. "It's not easy," she said. "I just try to understand what needs to be done and do it." "You'll learn too, it just takes time." He nodded, feeling a mixture of humility and admiration. "I think I'm learning," he admitted. "You've made me see that I underestimated what someone can do." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried warmth without losing strength. "We all underestimate things at first," she said. "The important part is learning and adjusting." As darkness fell, the cowboy lit a small lantern and prepared a simple dinner. Conversation flowed more easily now, stories exchanged between bites of bread and stew. He learned about her upbringing, the skills she had developed, and the experiences that had shaped her resilience. She asked about his life on the ranch, the routines he followed, and the challenges he had faced alone. By the end of the meal, there was a shared understanding between them, a recognition of each other's strengths, and a quiet agreement that they were beginning to work as a team. Later, as they sat on the porch, the stars emerging in the clear night sky, the cowboy realized that the day's challenges had changed something in him. The woman who had arrived unexpectedly, so different from his imagination, had proven herself capable, reliable, and intelligent. He no longer thought about what he had expected her to be. Instead, he considered what she was, a strong, remarkable partner, someone who could handle the ranch, the animals, and the demands of life alongside him. "You know," he said quietly, "I wasn't sure how this would work when you arrived. I thought it might be difficult." She looked at him, her expression open and thoughtful. "It is different," she said, "but that doesn't mean it can't work. We just need to keep learning from each other." He nodded, feeling a sense of relief and excitement. "I think we can do that," he said. "I think we'll manage together." The night deepened, and the ranch was quiet except for the occasional rustle of animals and the distant sound of water in the stream. The cowboy and the Apache woman sat in companionable silence, each lost in thought, but connected by the shared experiences of the day. The challenges had been real, the work hard, and the surprises constant. But through it all, they had begun to build trust, understanding, and respect. For the first time, the cowboy felt that the life he had imagined, quiet, predictable, and solitary, was no longer what he wanted. This new life, filled with strength, challenge, and partnership, was far more appealing. And he knew that the coming days would bring more tests, more surprises, and more opportunities to grow together. He glanced at her, noting the way she rested after the long day, her eyes reflecting the fading light of the sunset. "You've changed my mind about a lot of things today," he said softly. She smiled faintly, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "Good," she said. "I hope that means you'll keep an open mind for tomorrow, too." He laughed, a light, genuine sound, and realized that for the first time in a long while, he was not thinking about what he had expected. He was thinking about what they could do together, how they could face the challenges of the ranch, and how they could build something meaningful and strong together. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The cowboy was already awake, the early light filtering through the curtains as he stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. Today promised to be different. The work ahead would test them both in ways they hadn't yet faced. Storm clouds had gathered on the horizon the night before, and the forecast predicted a heavy rain. He knew the animals and the ranch would need careful attention, and he wondered if the Apache woman was ready for a day that demanded more than ordinary effort. By the time she emerged from her room, dressed in practical clothing and with her hair tied back, he felt a mixture of nervous anticipation and admiration. She had a quiet confidence, the kind that suggested she didn't shy away from hard work or difficult tasks. Her presence alone seemed to command attention not just from him but from the animals on the ranch, who moved cautiously around her, sensing her steady authority. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Looks like the storm is coming. We'll need to prepare everything before it hits." She nodded, her expression calm. "I saw the clouds last night. Let's make sure the animals are safe first, then we can check the fences and barns." Together they moved quickly, beginning with the animals. The horses had been restless the night before, sensing the approaching storm, and the cowboy led them into the stables while she secured the gates and checked that each animal had enough food and water. She worked efficiently, lifting heavy feed sacks, moving them without hesitation, and adjusting the fencing where needed. The cowboy couldn't help but notice how her presence reassured the animals. Even the most nervous horse followed her lead without question. Once the animals were safe, they turned their attention to the barn. The previous day's repairs had held, but the roof still had weak spots. Rain could seep in and damage equipment, hay, or even the structure itself. He climbed carefully onto the roof, pointing out the areas that needed reinforcement. She followed closely, carrying tools and supplies, and when a particularly heavy beam needed to be moved, she lifted it with ease, placing it exactly where it belonged. The cowboy felt a mix of relief and admiration. Her strength and skill made the work far easier, but more than that, her calm, confident manner reassured him that they could handle whatever challenges the storm might bring. By late morning, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft at first but quickly growing heavier. The wind picked up, and the sky darkened, casting a gray shadow over the ranch. They worked quickly, securing loose equipment, checking the fences, and ensuring that nothing could be blown away or damaged. The cowboy struggled to move a heavy gate, slipping in the mud, and she was there immediately, steadying him and guiding the gate into place. "You've got to watch your footing," she said calmly, her voice carrying authority without anger. "The mud will make you slip if you're not careful." He nodded, grateful for her guidance. "Thanks," he said. "I don't know what I would do without you." She smiled faintly, brushing mud from her sleeves. "We'll get through it together. That's all that matters." The storm intensified, and they found themselves facing another challenge. A small tree had fallen near the fence line, blocking access to one of the pastures. The cowboy knew that if the cattle couldn't reach their grazing area, they would become restless and stressed. He looked at the tree, then at her, realizing that it would take both of them to move it. "Can you help me with this?" he asked, trying not to sound doubtful. She nodded, grasping the trunk with steady hands. Together they pushed and lifted, balancing the weight between them. The tree resisted at first, but gradually, with careful coordination, they managed to roll it to the side, clearing the path. Both were soaked from the rain, their clothes heavy with mud and water, but a sense of accomplishment warmed them despite the storm. As they paused to catch their breath, the cowboy looked at her and realized how much he had underestimated her. Her strength, intelligence, and resilience were not just physical but also mental. She assessed problems quickly, adapted to changing circumstances, and worked tirelessly without complaint. He had imagined difficulty and surprise when she arrived, but now he saw that she was exactly the kind of person he needed by his side. The storm raged on, and they returned to the barn to check on the animals again. A cow had slipped in the mud and seemed nervous, refusing to move toward the shelter. She approached calmly, speaking softly and gently guiding it with a steady hand. The animal responded immediately, following her direction without hesitation. The cowboy watched, amazed by her patience and skill. It was not just her strength that impressed him, but her ability to think clearly under pressure and solve problems quickly. By late afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving the ranch wet, muddy, and in need of repair. They worked together to mend fences, secure loose items, and check on the animals one last time before the sun began to set. The sky cleared gradually, revealing streaks of orange and purple, and a sense of peace returned to the land. They stood together on the porch, dripping wet, exhausted but satisfied. The ranch was safe, the animals secure, and their work complete. For a moment neither spoke, both lost in the quiet calm that followed the storm. The cowboy realized that the day's challenges had taught him something important. He was not alone, and together they could face anything. "You know," he said finally, breaking the silence, "I thought the hardest part of this would be adjusting to each other, figuring out how to live together. But today was harder than I imagined." She glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "The land always tests you," she said, "and the storm reminded us that we need to work together. Alone, it would have been much harder." He nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "I think we make a good team," he admitted. "I wasn't sure when you arrived, but now I know we can handle whatever comes." She smiled faintly, a mix of amusement and approval in her eyes. "Good," she said. "We'll need that teamwork for the days ahead. Life on a ranch isn't easy and challenges will always appear. The question is whether you can face them and learn from them." Dinner that night was quiet, the simple meal warmed by the fire in the kitchen. Conversation flowed easily now, a mix of stories from their pasts, observations about the ranch, and plans for the next day. The cowboy found himself laughing at her sharp humor and thoughtful insights, realizing that her strength and intelligence were matched by a wit and warmth he hadn't expected. As the evening deepened, they stepped outside once more. The land glistened with rain, the smell of wet earth strong in the air, and the ranch seemed to sparkle under the light of the setting sun. The cowboy looked at her and felt a sense of calm and reassurance. She was no longer just a surprise arrival, no longer an unexpected guest. She had become a partner, someone whose presence made the ranch stronger, whose abilities made the work lighter, and whose character earned his respect and admiration. "You've changed the way I see things," he said quietly, his voice carrying over the wet grass. "I thought I knew what I wanted, what life would be like, but you've shown me there's more to it than I imagined." She turned to him, eyes reflecting the fading light. "I hope that's a good thing," she said. He nodded, smiling. "It is. It's more than good. It's real. And that's what matters." The night grew darker, the first stars appearing in the clear sky. They sat together on the porch, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch settling after the storm, the distant murmur of animals, and the rustling of wet grass. The cowboy realized that their partnership had deepened, forged in the challenges of the day, and strengthened by mutual respect, trust, and understanding. For the first time since she had arrived, he felt that the life he had imagined, quiet, solitary, predictable, was no longer enough. This new life, unpredictable and full of strength, challenge, and partnership, was far more meaningful. And he knew that the days ahead would bring more tests, more surprises, and more opportunities to grow together. As they watched the stars appear above the wet, glistening land, the cowboy felt a quiet hope stirring in his chest. He no longer worried about the unexpected arrival, the differences in size, or the challenges they would face. What mattered now was the team they had become, the understanding they had built, and the bond that was forming between them, a bond strong enough to face anything the ranch or life could throw their way. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting golden light across the fields and turning the dew into tiny sparkling gems. The cowboy awoke to the familiar sounds of birds and the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. Today was calm, quiet, a welcome change after the storms and challenges of the past few days. Yet he felt a sense of anticipation. Life on the ranch had begun to feel different, richer, fuller, and it was all because of the woman who had arrived unexpectedly. She was already up, tending to the animals with a natural grace that seemed effortless. The cows moved calmly under her direction, the horses grazing nearby, all responding to her presence with respect. He watched her for a moment, noticing how she adjusted to the work, how she anticipated what needed to be done without instruction, and how she managed everything with both strength and care. For the first time, he realized that she had not only adapted to his world, she had improved it. "Morning," he said, stepping outside and tipping his hat. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Good morning," she said. "The land looks peaceful today. I think the storm did some good." He nodded, smiling back. "Yes, the animals are calm, the fence is held up, and the barn is stronger than ever. You made that possible." She shrugged lightly, brushing a hand over her hair. "We made it possible. It's easier when you work together." The cowboy felt warmth in his chest. Her presence had changed the way he saw the ranch, the work, and even himself. He had expected someone gentle, quiet, and small, someone who would fit neatly into the life he had built. Instead, he had been given a partner, someone capable, strong, and intelligent, who brought new energy and skill to every task. He realized that life with her was better than any expectation he had held, and he felt gratitude for the chance to learn and grow alongside her. After tending to the animals, they walked toward the neighbor's farm. The neighbors had been skeptical when she first arrived, whispering about her size, her confidence, and how different she was from what they had imagined. Some had doubted that the cowboy could manage a life with her at all. But today, they would see the reality, a team working together, a partnership built on mutual respect and cooperation. As they approached the neighbor's fence, they were greeted with cautious nods and polite greetings. The neighbors looked surprised to see them working so efficiently together, moving equipment, checking fences, and discussing plans in calm, confident tones. One of the older ranchers, a man who had been particularly skeptical, raised his eyebrows. "She's strong," he said quietly to another neighbor. "And smart, I didn't expect that." The cowboy overheard and smiled. "She is," he said proudly, "and we make a good team." The woman glanced at him, a faint smile touching her lips, and nodded. "Yes," she said simply, "we do." Back at the ranch, the day was filled with steady work and quiet moments of conversation. They repaired fences, guided the cattle, and prepared for the approaching season, all with a rhythm that had become comfortable. The cowboy noticed how she thought ahead, anticipating problems before they occurred, and how she balanced strength with care, ensuring that every action was precise and effective. He realized that her presence had made the ranch not only more efficient, but also safer and more harmonious. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, they paused to rest under the shade of a large oak tree. They shared simple food, bread, cheese, and cold water, and talked about the future. Plans for new fences, irrigation for the fields, and care for the animals filled their conversation. The cowboy found himself relying on her suggestions, recognizing that her insight was invaluable. "You've changed the way I see this place," he said, looking around at the land that stretched under the late sun. "I thought I knew what life here would be like, but you've made it better, stronger, smarter." She smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "I didn't change the land," she said. "You did that yourself, I just helped keep it that way." And sometimes seeing things from a different perspective helps. He nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect. "I didn't know how much I needed someone like you until you arrived. You've made the ranch, and even me, better than before." The days passed, each bringing new challenges and opportunities. Some were small, like fixing a broken tool or mending a section of fence. Others were more serious: a storm that threatened the barns, a sick animal that needed careful attention, or a stubborn horse that refused to follow directions. But through every task, they worked together, learning to anticipate each other's needs, relying on each other's strengths, and building a bond that grew deeper with every shared challenge. The neighbors began to notice the change too. Where skepticism had once lingered, there was now respect. They saw the woman's strength and intelligence, and they saw the cowboy's ability to adapt and trust. Slowly, the whispers of doubt faded, replaced by admiration for the partnership that had formed. People came to the ranch, asking for advice, sharing stories, and offering help, all recognizing the strength of the team that had surprised them so completely. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. The sky was a brilliant mix of oranges, purples, and pinks, and the ranch lay quiet and peaceful. The cowboy felt a sense of completion, a feeling that the life he had imagined alone was not as fulfilling as the life he now shared with her. "I've been thinking," he said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I used to imagine life in a very simple way, quiet, predictable, and easy, but now I can't imagine it without you." She looked at him, her expression calm but thoughtful. "I feel the same," she said. "Life here is different than anything I expected, but in the best way. You've welcomed me, and together we've built something strong, something real." He nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "I never expected a partnership like this, but I'm grateful for it. You've made everything better than I could have imagined." She smiled in return, a warmth in her eyes that matched the golden light of the evening. "And you've made me feel at home," she said. "Safe, respected, part of something bigger than myself." They sat together, quiet now, feeling the bond that had formed between them. The work, the challenges, the surprises, and the shared victories had created a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and understanding. The cowboy realized that love and companionship were not about size, appearances, or preconceived ideas. They were about shared effort, shared goals, and the willingness to face life's challenges together. As darkness settled over the ranch, the first stars appearing in the clear night sky, the cowboy felt a deep sense of satisfaction and hope. The woman who had arrived unexpectedly, who had surprised him in every way, had become an essential part of his life. Together they had overcome storms, managed the ranch, and gained the respect of neighbors. Together they had built a life stronger, richer, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. He glanced at her, sitting beside him on the porch, her presence steady and reassuring. "I never imagined life could be like this," he said softly, "but now I wouldn't want it any other way." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Neither would I," she said. And as they sat together, watching the stars and listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, the cowboy realized that the life he had once imagined alone was far less complete than the life he now shared. The challenges they had faced, the work they had done, and the trust they had built had created something lasting. A partnership that could withstand storms, handle any challenge, and grow stronger with every passing day. The land stretched out before them, peaceful and quiet, and the cowboy felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time, he understood that the unexpected arrival, the surprise, the difference from his imagined companion had been the best thing that could have happened. She was not just his partner. She was his equal, his strength, and his friend. Together, they could face anything, and together, they would continue to build a life that was richer, fuller, and more extraordinary than he had ever dreamed. As the night deepened, they finally rose and went inside, ready to rest and prepare for the next day. The stars shone above, a quiet reminder of the vast possibilities that lay ahead. And the cowboy knew with certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, stronger together than either could be alone.